Welcome to another OCD Recovery Instagram Live. I'm going to be talking today about a little bit about the OCD recovery journey and timelines and sort of time frames and what's involved in that. So what happens is people get into a position where we obviously want OCD finished. We want it gone today. It's not going to go like that. You're not going to just have it all gone today suddenly. It's not going to work like that. We all want a quick fix from OCD. We all want it gone yesterday. We all want it sort of instant relief now, because when it's locked on and it's latched, it feels very strong. It feels very sort of all-consuming. And the problem with that is we all remember, I have to put myself back into that position to think about those times. We all remember what that felt like, how sort of all-consuming that was. And, you know, I remember the first times when I was locked in it, where it was sort of completely heart-pounding, feeling like it was complete life and death moment. There was not going to be any relief. It was just all completely locked on solid. And sort of racing about, going to everything online, going to therapy, going to everything just to try and get rid of it instantly. And when someone says, bring it for the ride, which is a phrase that I sort of coined to ensure that people can get an idea of what's going on and sort of to give up that internal work rate, what happens is they get into a position where they're so fed up with being told to sort of just sit with it. You know, so when someone says, bring it for the ride, they mean just sit with it, do nothing. I've been doing nothing. I feel like crap. That's not what we're talking about. It's not a case of completely doing nothing, because nothing is learning nothing, seeing nothing different. It's like if you saw somebody that had a really difficult disease and they were learning to live with it, very anxious and very angry. If you saw them in a chair, they would be just sitting with it. But then as months passed, they'd come to terms with it. Now, they would still, to the observer, be just sitting with it, but they wouldn't just be doing the same as they were. Their perception of things had changed. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about changing our perception of it gradually. That is the difference. But you won't be able to fix it. You're going to have to feel some anxiety in the short term. Albert Ellis talks about that in the books, with sort of low frustration tolerance, where we just sort of hate having any sensations. Now, we can all think of a moment where we were out enjoying ourselves with friends or whatever, even with anxiety, and we were distracted, and it didn't feel so locked on. It didn't feel so latched because we were distracted, so it dropped down a few notches. Now, that's the same here with that bringing it for the ride situation, is when you're sitting sort of, I've got to get rid of this. I really don't want that sensation. It's completely internally locked, you know, inside your chest, inside your jaw, inside your muscles, in your neck, in everything. You feel completely all consumed by it. Like, you know, I've got to just get out of this sort of internal web that I'm stuck in. And that does the exact opposite. That's sort of pouring gasoline on the bonfire to put it out. So we're going to have to get used to, okay, this is going to take a bit of time. It doesn't mean forever. And one of the things that I noticed was I always wanted rid of it in days, weeks, or sort of 1 month. I wanted it very much gone, pretty much most of the time in sort of 24 hours, okay? And it doesn't work like that. It's not something that some people come into me, they've been stuck for many years, and they may come in and have a few sessions, get better, feel great for a year or two. Some people come in, it takes them a few weeks, a few months, few years. It's all different for everyone. Some people just need a sort of change in perception on a few areas and they can feel a hell of a lot better. Some people need a lot of practice to get under it. It's a very resilient thing, you know, it's very stubborn. It's not releasing that easily. So because something that's that stubborn, don't expect it to sort of just give way by you sort of just dismissing it or leaving it there. It's not going to do that. Otherwise it would have done, because you tried that on day one. Now, one of the things that I posted today on one of my posts at the bottom, if you read what I wrote under the latest post, was when I got to a position where I thought to myself, do you know what? Screw this. I'm not going to keep trying to get rid of this every day, because I've tried that method for a bloody long time. I'm going to work on the basis of, even if this takes me 5 years, even if I'm stuck, locked in my head for the next couple of years, for a lot of the time, physical anxiety, do you know what? I'm not going to die. It's going to feel crap a lot of the time, but you know what? It's my option. I'm going to learn. It's my genetics. I've got the option to learn and to change my thinking. I'm going to take this as a journey. You know what? I've been trying to get rid of it every day, every single moment. I'm going to give it a few years, see what happens. Very quickly, I realised there was a lot of weight taken off my shoulders, because in that moment, I realised very fast that I had this sort of internal work rate, this insistency to get rid of it very, very quickly. And that was sort of stoking this sort of OCD fire, because the inner work rate is like treading water in a pool. When you're treading really fast, you can't float. And what's floating? Floating is that very sort of important part of the recovery journey where we're learning to sort of let go more. And I'll get 100 messages saying, how do I let go? How do I float? Because that's what I was doing. Because then I was chasing, I want to know, I want to think, I want to answer, I want to fix. And what was happening there is I was very much trying to tread water more frantically. Claire Weeks talks about floating. It's one of the key principles in her books, Self-Help for Your Nerves, and the book on our reading list, and many of her other books. If you go into anxiety forums, which I spent over a decade in, floating was one of those things that I started to learn more about as I went through, as time went past. And I started to think to myself, well, hold on, this is what I'm doing. I'm fighting so hard to get rid of this and chasing and going to every post and everything. And I started to change that. I started to say to myself, right, no Googling, which is obviously one of the most important things when we're trying to recover. And I then started to think to myself, all right, just live this day, even if you feel absolutely shit. You're going to feel anxiety pumping through your chest. Even if you feel all of that, you've still got to live your life. And that was really important to me. That changed a lot for me. I'd spent a lot of time up until that, just every moment measuring it, like with an internal thermometer in my head. How anxious am I? I had this sort of imaginary internal thermometer in my head all the time. How anxious am I? How was today? How much did I enjoy that day? When I went out the other night, was I feeling relaxed? Was I feeling anxious? What was I feeling? Whenever I was standing in a bar, I would be thinking, how anxious am I? How chronic guilty am I? And obviously that was locked on and latched for a long period of that time. So that's where it was going, and everything I did was in relation to wanting to be rid of a sensation. If I was lying in the sun, I'd be thinking, am I feeling relaxed? Or I'll stay in the sun all the time because my anxiety is lower. If I'm eating chocolate, does that make me feel better? So I'll just do more of that. If I'm working out, then I'll work out all the time to get that feeling. And I was doing everything to fight it, to get rid of it. And that was the problem. I was trying everything to escape, everything to run from it internally. That was the problem. That was what was really keeping me stuck. But that doesn't mean it unlatches with that simplicity. Otherwise, what would happen is we would be able to just read books that were talking about these sort of principles, which can be answered quite simplistically, as I'm doing here, but it's certainly not that. To often get under OCD, and let me highlight often, because in a lot of cases not needed, it certainly was with me, to get it to release the chronic guilt and chronic anxiety, I had to get under those very stubborn, irrational beliefs. And that involved working towards unconditional self-life and other acceptance, the main principles that Albert Ellis taught in his REBT, Rational Motive Behavior Therapy, which formed CBT later on. He outlined why, and also another quote to draw in there is Korzybski said that God may forgive our sins, but our nervous system won't. And that was very true. And that's what he draws on that in the Myth of Self-Esteem book, talking about in reference to quotes like that, how our nervous system just stays completely latched on when it sees that there's something to be terrified of, something to be scared of. And that was very much the case for me, because I was completely scared with a chronic real event from the past over 15 years ago that I believed made me guilty chronically and should be tortured in my mind forever and ever, the usual harm, OCD, chronic guilt related stuff. So it was realizing that actually I could accept myself still if I change my perspectives and adopt unconditional self-acceptance instead of conditional self-acceptance, which makes a scientific evidence-based change in thinking as opposed to the irrational, which isn't. And so I was able to see that. That I was just accepting myself conditionally and writing myself off if I did something wrong in the past, which obviously OCD would zoom in like a homing missile for that thing. So that was a very key part of the journey for changing things. And but it took a long time to understand that, because obviously that's going against what most of the society thinks. Most society is very, very much conditional based. They're very stuck on what people think of. If what people think of them, they view their whole self as if people think they're cool, then they rate themselves as completely cool. If people think they're weak or not cool. They view themselves as that. And so they're bobbing around to whatever people are thinking of them at different times. And that's sort of jumping around left, right and centre. So that becomes an issue, because then they're held hostage by whatever anyone thinks of them. And obviously doing Albert Ellis's shame attacking exercises would be very helpful for them to give up seeing that they do not need others' approval, which was one major area that harm OCD latches to. What will others think? My family will write me off if I did that. My relationship will write me off if I do that. Friends, family, everyone will write me off if I do that. And that's where it had a lot of power, because it knew that if it was latched like that, if it could always find something to latch like that. It could always find that situation. There would always be that thing in the past that would be able for it to get its claws on. So unconditional provides a framework where there is nothing, because it's unconditional. There is no condition for it to latch on. Conditions is what it's going for. That doesn't mean you need to bolt down unconditional self-acceptance, sort of perfectly understanding it and embodying it. You don't need to do that. But you need to, it is very helpful, and the more I became in that position, it released a lot better. But in a lot of cases, and I would consider myself in a case where I was very, very, I would consider my sort of suffering with OCD, and if I was working with myself and coaching myself from day one, I would consider myself someone where OCD was, really gripped in, someone that was really suffering sort of in a really severe chronic format. I'm certainly, all the thousands of people I've worked with over the past decade, I'd still consider myself in one of the worst sort of categories, because I had really bad physical symptoms. I was in hospital a few times with all my stomach, esophagus damage from GERD, and really bad physical symptoms that cause so many problems. So I definitely think that getting a much better understanding of unconditional self-acceptance played a significant part in my own journey, because it got under so many of those really stubborn sort of web that I was in of anxiety, where it was really latching to everything in the past, and it wouldn't release at all. Like, I was going about life and sort of, although even when I got better, quite a lot better, it was still sort of lightly clinched in the background. I could feel that chronic guilt to some degree, that when I was standing in a bar, I was always still thinking, what do people think of me here? Bear in mind, I was 24, 25 at the time. Most of your social life is out in bars and nightclubs and stuff like that. And whenever I'd walk in, I'd think, if only they knew what I'd done, this kind of thing. And it was nothing that I'd done. Well, there was real events, but they had been morphed to far more extreme than what I could imagine. And OCD kept moving the goalposts all the time. So there was a lot of that going on. So you've got to view these shifts. You're not going to happen overnight. I could work with somebody intensely for 10 hours a day for a week. They wouldn't be able to cram it in like that. The same as you wouldn't be able to learn French in a day, which is often something that I tell people, because otherwise they're chasing so hard to get rid of it. Now let's have a look at some of these questions here. Visual snow. I used to have a lot of different physical symptoms, as I was just saying. One of them was the visual snow, very much latched visually to how I was, sort of what I was seeing out of my eyes, sort of like a snow, a mist, short-sightedness getting worse in the evenings when anxiety was risen, more different things like that. And physical symptoms are very consuming in so many different ways, because they come on out of nowhere, and they often shift out of nowhere and make sudden changes out of nowhere. And because they do that, and they make these sort of sudden changes out of nowhere, you think, God, something's really gone wrong with me very quickly. And it was different. Like I would suddenly be in a very cold climate, maybe in winter in somewhere, and I would feel, God, my skin is so much worse, that my eczema is so much worse than it was last year. And then I'd say to a friend, maybe I was in New York at the time, and I'd say to a friend, my skin is so bad at the moment, my eczema. It'd be, oh no, it's just very, very cold here. That's what it is. And then I'd sort of self-reassure myself, it's just my skin is very bad at the moment. It must be the very, very cold weather. But it wasn't. It was anxiety. It was flaring up eczema. I was getting really bad eczema flare-ups. Then in the heat, I'd be sweating so much more, or I would be I would be, what other things? Lots of skin-related problems I got in relation to the physical symptoms, which were obviously there from genetic part outside of OCD, but OCD was flaring that up, urticaria, hives, all these conditions that were coming on from different things, because the anxiety was so high. So everything was, sort of being blasted. And so a lot of those things are very frustrating. I felt like the peaks of my anxiety, I felt my whole body was breaking down every day. Like every day there'd be a new physical symptom every week. And these were genuine health physical symptoms. I'd be getting rashes on my arms. I'd be getting all kinds of things. And I'd be in and out of the doctors all the time, which doesn't help when you have health OCD too. And only when I brought the anxiety down significantly did a lot of those release and let go of their grip. But before that, they were very much changing all the time, and it was a very tiring battle where for those around me, they just kept saying, oh no, your eczema is really bad. But I knew it wasn't that, because it wasn't like that before. It was far worse because of what anxiety was doing. And then you think, well, how can anxiety be doing all this to me? Like, it's just anxiety. I read on these forums that other people are just having thoughts. Why am I getting all these physical symptoms? So it's different for different people. Let's have a look here at these questions. Lost where I was now on these questions. 1 second. Do you think that pure OCD medication is necessary when it's so bad? Medication helps take the edge off. There's some good videos on our new TikTok channel talking about that by Kirsty. So if you check those out, you can see all about that. Pure OCD is just normal OCD, but just it's all that's happening there is you're not having an outward compulsion. It's in the mind. You're locked in the mind with certain fears. That sort of locked on sensation, not locked in the mind. It's all OCD is the same. I had contamination OCD originally. Then when I got rid of all the compulsions for that, it became the so-called pure O, which is a term that I don't think we should drop. We should just use OCD and describe it better. Then we wouldn't need that term. Suicidal OCD, will be doing a specific video on that topic, so that will be going onto the YouTube channel, so if you check that out, you'll be able to see that there. In relation to sort of broad questions, we can't cover these on the Instagram Live, but on the YouTube channel, lots of those are covered. Yeah, it doesn't matter if you have a real event, even if it was a real event. Look, this is the biggest mistake that's made, that I would say one of the biggest mistakes made today in the OCD community, is that there's so much talk, always has been, and for those of you who follow me and see all the work that we do, is showing people that if thoughts are thoughts is certainly not, thoughts are thoughts is not going to cut it for OCD most of the time. And so what happens is we get a situation where someone has a real event. What happens if someone actually did have HIV or did have cancer or did have caused a violent crime? You couldn't just tell them thoughts are thoughts. It wouldn't work. They would need to have the tools to get under it. These are vital tools that I think are very important to teach in the schooling system from a young age, because it allows people to stubbornly refuse to make themselves miserable about anything. And then they can view an act as wrong or something. The disease is not very nice and very unpleasant, but they won't sort of write their whole self off from it, and they'll be able to learn to stand it, which is a very, very key part of the recovery journey. So that's key. You do have to learn to get under real events. I had certain things happen in life that were not good, were difficult, were challenges, some very difficult things. And if I hadn't learned to accept them in real life, it wouldn't have mattered how much I said thoughts are thoughts to myself, because it wouldn't have released. Right. Bear with me here. Very slow with these apps. 1 second. All the people in the WhatsApp groups tell me I'm a dinosaur because I'm completely out of touch with using a lot of these things. Do you I'm pretty curious about Korzybski, but a lot of his work's obviously been pretty difficult. Do you have any you don't have to get too involved in Korzybski in general for recovery. There's some helpful principles. It takes it very far out of the box on a lot of things. It's like trying to read sort of Adler for OCD recovery. We wouldn't really get there. You want to look at the Ellis books on the reading list, where they reference points of Korzybski where they're helpful, but you don't really need to read it on him on his own. getting under the fear, I mean learning to dispute the irrational belief to get to change the irrational belief to the rational alternative, so that then you're not in a chronically anxious cycle. When did I know I was recovering from OCD? When I used to start to feel better, bit by bit by bit. But it was very ups and downs, like a roller coaster with lots of peaks and troughs. Some of the worst days followed the best days, and vice versa. Glad to see, Liv, that we've helped you with the real event OCD, changing your perspective on that. Real event OCD started for me completely out of nowhere. It was just I was on a vacation with my parents, and I was having a nice time, and then suddenly my OCD was scanning for something to ruin it, and it did. It locked onto something from when I was about 13 and stayed latched for about 3 years. So I certainly wasn't able to enjoy that holiday much. I had no tools at all, and it was very, very difficult. I didn't even know what OCD was barely at that time. I will be doing a video on all my journey with the thoughts, so-called themes. I don't really like the word themes, we like thoughts. Keeps it more in reality of how it is. I'll be doing a big talk. Well, I'll be doing talk all about that, about my journey, and all the different how the thoughts moved for different things and morphed to different things, and how I got under those things. And I think that will be helpful for a lot of people to just see that when they're getting frustrated with how it morphs, and it feels like a sort of antibiotic resistant thing in the brain, OCD, because it just keeps morphing and moving around whatever you're doing. People can often feel lost and hopeless at that point. So I cover a lot of that to really help people to see that's part of the journey, and it will often shift more and more as you get better. It doesn't have to do that, but it often can, and about how that all operated in me. I can't answer all the questions just because there's a lot on these Instagram lives now, so I just try and cover a few as I'm going through. Accepting real event feels like accepting I'm a monster. No, because monster is a conditional term. It's writing off the whole human being as a monster. So as you read The Myth of Self-Esteem, Albert Ellis' second book on our reading list, it will break that down. So a human can never be a monster. They can have traits or behaviours that aren't very helpful to them in life, but certainly can't be a monster, and that's a key principle there. Yes, in relation to real event OCD and guilt, it likes that because the past can't be changed. So it will, it's going to specifically go for that. Because it knows that if you say, often it will go for things in the future, maybe diseases, certain health concerns or whatever, but it will often also go for things in the past because you can't change the past. So, and especially if it wants to try and sabotage you being chronically guilty forever and not enjoying your life, it's often going to go down that path. So you just got to be ready that it's going to do that. It's going to do that. It's going to attack you. I mean, bear in mind, it's not a sort of a monster thing. We often talk about it like that in the sense of it doing it to you, but it's just a sort of anxiety is protecting your life, and it's just more tuned like a sort of a smoke alarm that goes off a lot. It's very sensitive, and with anxiety, with OCD, you've got to. What you need to think about it is there to save your life. It is there. It is doing a good thing. We tend to view it in such a bad way, but it is doing a good thing. And it's the less you become scared of it, the better your relationship with it is going to become, because people often get very frightened of it itself, and then they're trying to internally reject it all the time. Imagining it more, seeing it more as something to help you, as frustrating as it is. Now, it's obviously going to turn up the heat if you don't want to invite it to your wedding, to your honeymoon, to your holiday abroad, to everything. It's going to do that because it knows that it doesn't want to be, if you don't want to bring it along for the ride, it's going to keep turning up the pressure. That's what it does, because it's like trying to not feel your heartbeat. If you try not to not feel your heartbeat's going to be harder. So it was very much like that. Why I wanted to avoid holidays initially, and I used to want to avoid going abroad a lot because I always thought, oh, OCD is going to destroy it, so I might as well be at home, because if I'm feeling shit here, what's the point of going? But then when I actually went and brought it for the ride more, I felt better over time. But that doesn't have to relate to going away. Often people message me just before they're going away. That can relate to going out for a nice lunch, going to see your family where you haven't seen them for a while, all different things, OCD is going to do that. And I remember those moments, like, I remember those moments when I'm doing things now where I think this is nice. This is something that I would have disliked in the past with OCD, because I could remember all those moments where it was trying to sabotage it. And I think that's key to look at those points, where it's going to get in. It's going to get in on those things. It's going to, as you're going on holiday, it's going to say you've forgotten your passport. As you're going to see your family, it's going to maybe try and attack them in your mind, so you feel guilty when seeing them and ruin the moment, which might be ruined by sort of thinking that you're staring at them, or thinking bad things about them, or inappropriate things that you imagine are inappropriate, all different areas like that. So it will do that. It's always one move ahead, because it's in you. So it's whenever you're already starting to look for something, it's already jumped in before, hence why it can jump in prior to, if you're going shopping or something and there's a vulnerable person walking along, you might feel an urge to push them out of nowhere. Now, that's not you wanting to push them, that's an urge that you're sending out that scanning for safety, and then it does that sensation. So that's where intrusive urges come. They come out of nowhere, so then people believe it's their sort of inner voice of themselves, where it isn't, but it feels like that. It's very confusing, because people usually have a very limited understanding of OCD. It's not explained in that way. So then people are more scared of, oh my God, but I thought OCD was just thoughts, not urges. So that's why we do a lot of work on bringing the importance and awareness of urges to the forefront, so people can understand exactly how that operates and what's involved in that. And I think that's so key to people's journey, because if they don't see that there's urges, thoughts, emotions, all of that can be manipulated, sort of hijacked in the brain, where the OCD is in terms of it hijacking there, they then feel lost and think that there's something seriously wrong with them. Now, obviously, that can become a reassurance compulsion if it's sort of reiterated over and over again. But initially, it gives some understanding, the same as the thoughts are thoughts. And the initial part is it brings great understanding to a person, because they realise, I'm not stuck forever going mad and something's wrong here. I actually have this condition, this thing called OCD, which is an anxiety disorder, and they understand it. So it gives them some understanding, but after that, it can become compulsive. Okay, guys, great to be on here and to see you all. I will be coming on here and doing a Q&A format, so that I can cover later in the week, so I can cover all your different questions and answers. And I will be covering more individual thoughts, OCD thoughts, and doing specific videos on them soon. Great to see you all, and thanks for the great responses, all about how things are helping, and the pages and the coaching, different things that we do. And I will, if anything you want covered in any of the Instagram lives, just DM this account with the questions that you have, and we'll get those covered. All right, guys, see you later. Take it easy.